Did you expect it? Did it come out of the blue? Tell me.
I don't think you ever expect. I think a lot of times you try to go to work and do your role and do it to the best of your ability. And obviously, I was aware that the position was open and was hopeful. It's something that I believe a year ago when I came back, I kind of voiced that was my dream, was to be linebackers coach here. And so there was kind of a lot of unknown going through those few weeks and going on the road and recruiting for the first time and all of that, actually in person and doing that stuff. But I felt pretty confident that I had done the best job I could have to prepare myself for the opportunity, and just grateful that Coach Day believed in me.
James, you're known as kind of a recruiter already. What did you learn about yourself as a recruiter from finally being able to go on the hood?
A lot of logistics, you're trying to figure out. I mean, ever since I was young, I've always, I think it was because of my dad, I always wanted to be on time. So really, to be honest, that was the first thing that popped in my mind. If I told a coach I was going to be there at a certain time, I wanted to be early or on time. And you're just trying to map out how many schools can you see within a certain amount of time, and trying to prioritize what players you wanted to see, in those time periods as well. So I thrived on the opportunity to meet these players, their coaches, the people who are important to them in person. It's one thing to think to do it over the phone. It's another thing to be able to do it in person and let them see you and face to face. I think is a lot more impactful. So I was grateful for that opportunity and look forward to continuing to do it.
Do you feel like you proved yourself during that time as somebody who they needed to promote?
I hope so. I mean, Coach Day was with me day one when we went down through Florida, so quite honestly, I viewed it as a job interview when I was there with him. I knew I was going to be presenting to a couple of the guys kind of what we offer, but thankfully it was guys that I had previous relationship with and was really comfortable with. And so I felt like it was I treated it like a job opportunity. It was something that I'd never done before, and Coach Day is always very aware, of everything going on in the program. So, yeah, I took it that way, and I'm thankful I did.
What do you think will be different, if anything? We know that you had a pretty active role last year as that production assistant.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate the responsibilities being any different? What do you think this year looks like for you now?
I don't think a lot is different. I certainly felt like the linebacker coach last year. I think the guys would have said the same thing. It's the little things that it's the little things to me that maybe not doing some things in the breakdown that a graduate assistant does. Being able to have my own office is, to be honest, like when you're meeting with the guys, and we were kind of meeting in the defensive staff room, and everyone's trying to get ready for practice, right? So people are walking in and out, and I think just having my own space, that's something that it's a little thing, but something I'm looking forward to, definitely. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's all those, just knowing that the title brings that's your, like, those are your guys, that's your room. And there's a lot of responsibility with that, but I cherish that.
When did you work out?
You sat down here last year and you talked about everything you learned in that first year with Marcus and coming here. It's like, well, now what?
Yeah.
What's the difference in you as a coach after year two now?
Man, I think a lot of it is, I think I spoke about it last year. It's teaching progression is one thing. And now, thankfully, being in the same scheme for 2 years in a row, I think will be very beneficial. Year one at Notre Dame, you're learning how to teach it, and you forget what young college players don't know. And then coming over here, a lot of it was trying to learn what Knowles was, not only his scheme, but how he wanted it to be coached. And now understanding the scheme and kind of what it is, you can just dive deeper. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm looking forward. It's a big spring for our guys, with Cody and CJ and Gabe Powers and Arvell Reese. So there's a lot of guys that are going to be fighting for playing time. I think Cody's really the only one with starts under his belt. So it's a big spring for a lot of our guys.
You said you didn't have an office. Where did you work out of last year?
With all the other, we call it the patch, with all the other the guys, you know, with all the other support staff. I don't even know how many of us are in there, but we all sit in the same room and all have our own computer, and got the job done.
The patch is like. What does that look like?
Well, there's no windows, so it can get pretty. You have no idea. You have no idea what time of day it is, which sometimes can be a blessing. But it's. I tell you what, though, there's a lot of good camaraderie in there. A lot of great guys in that room, and it could be really funny at times. I'll tell you that much.
How many guys were in that?
Let me count. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 guys. 6 guys in the office, and that's just when we're in there, and what I used to say, the real coaches are off in their offices, and now when everyone convenes, you got quite a few guys in there.
Do you feel like you have more of a voice now than you did a year ago? You understand what I'm saying, Jay?
Yeah, I do. I think
you feel more comfortable about speaking up.
Yeah, and I think early on, when I came back here, I was very aware of that. I being a former player here, I didn't want anyone in the building to think that. I'll put it this way, Tim. I wanted to work for everything, if that makes sense. I didn't want to come back, and I think sometimes there's a stigma with former players because sometimes I think some of them have been that way where they just expect things handed to them. I don't want that to be the case. I wanted to work for everything, and so a lot of times I would just absorb a lot of information. As the season went on, I felt a little more comfortable expressing stuff, but now that the title is what it is, I think you got to speak up when you see things a certain way, and whether that's scheme-wise or technique, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And look, I think a lot of times last year I agreed with a lot of what we were doing. I think we had a lot of success on defense. So,
like Austin pointed out to a minute ago, I mean, these guys, they listened. They were impressed by you. What do you think you brought last year that you look back on, just in the play of linebacker or whatever, that you can put your finger on that maybe kind of impressed Ryan as much as your recruiting prowess?
Well, I hope there's a certain intelligence that I brought. And I've talked to Cody Simon about this, Tommy Steele, all those guys, but I think there's a certain way to go about preparing, not only for practicing, but for the game and how you see the game that is very unique. And so I try to bring a perspective. I mean, it's one thing to go through and learn how to coach technique from clinics and all of that stuff. And then when you go out there and live it, like I was blessed to do, you kind of realize what works, what doesn't, what looks really good in practice, and what doesn't actually apply. And I'm constantly trying to reevaluate what I'm teaching these guys, because there's a lot of things that I've been taught that I'm like, this doesn't work. And then there's certain things that will work for certain players and won't. There's certain skill sets that maybe a Gabe Powers has that CJ Hicks doesn't have, and vice versa, right? So you're always trying to cater your techniques to the room as a whole, but also to the individual. And I just think playing gives me a perspective of, I also know mentally and physically what these guys are going through. I know what plays are realistic to make and what aren't. And I think the guys appreciate that, because I know Tommy and I have talked about it, where he just felt that having the perspective of someone who has done it before at the level that I was blessed to do it at, just kind of gave him that when I would say something, it carried some weight.
James, is there a chance that Sonny Styles could join your room? Maybe a better question for you in spring, but is there a chance Sonny's going to move down to linebacker?
I think that's a question probably above me, but I think Sonny has such a rare skill set in the sense that you saw it a little bit where he would play kind of the overhang last year. You didn't really know what he was. Was this a safety, right? Or is this more of an outside backer? Is he an old school Sam, to use those terms? He's just so versatile. And so I think there's a lot of different roles that we can kind of put Sonny in to kind of bring out the best in him. I think with his body size and his age, when you try to project him forward, he's kind of in that Isaiah Simmons mix, if you remember that name, where you're like, what really is he? Is he a safety? He's just a weapon. And so I think that's something that we have to kind of evaluate this spring, is kind of where to put him to not only best suit what we want to do as Silver Bullets, but also what's best for his future.
You mentioned CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers. What do they need to do entering their third year to get on the field a lot?
They just got to play. And I think it all comes down to consistency. Consistency breeds confidence. So, if you want to, put your stake on a position, you got to do it day in and day out. And I think, the vision that I have for our room is hopefully we come out of this spring to where we have at least 4 guys that have earned the right to play. That's my hope. And I don't know if that'll happen, but what I mean by that is, I thought last year we had 3 guys that earned the right to play. I thought with the way Cody Simon prepared during the spring and then in the fall, quite frankly, looking back, I wish I would have played Cody probably a little more. Last fall, he earned it. So I think when you look at it, it's okay, do we have 4 players, maybe 5, that can earn the right? Because if you play well enough, the season's going to be really long with this 12-game playoff, right? So you're looking at, 16 games or something? So we're going to have to rotate if we have the ability to. Now, if only 2 guys show up and prove that they're trustworthy, then 2 will play. But I hope that we have a room that is reflected kind of what Brian has in his room, where it's guys are constantly iron sharpening iron, trying to claw for the field and for playing time. And I hope that's what we can have, not only exiting this spring, but heading in the fall camp.
Being that you were on the field already last year with nose up in the box, I think the way you just put it, you were in charge of a lot of the rotations out there on game day. That being the first time you did it, now it's your job officially now. Just what did you learn going through that process last year on game day, and what you liked about the way you handle things, what you did?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, another thing I'm excited about when you're a full-time coach is not signaling. That's stressful, man, and obviously for big reason with a lot of the well-publicized stuff that kind of went on around signaling in our conference. I think it's very stressful. And when you're trying to come up you're talking about week after week changing signals. That took up a lot of your time. You became an expert in sign language sometimes with some of these calls. And I think not having to do that in a serious point of view is the fact that, when I'm signaling, I'm sitting there waiting for what Jim's going to call next, where I didn't have time to digest what happened on that play, right? You kind of had to separate coaching and signaling, where I think now just being able to coach, I'll have a lot better pulse on, okay, what are the plays that are actually happening? Because that's a lot to handle when it's going on, and you had to have 3, sometimes we had 5 signalers up and trying to confuse people on who's active, who's not. But I think also, this spring, for instance, you have to think about it, does Cody Simon need a lot of reps? I don't think so. I think there are young players who need to make a lot of mistakes, because I think some guys learn from making mistakes. And if you don't give them the opportunity to make a lot of mistakes, will they really truly grow? And so I think, this spring, I got to be even more intentional on rotations, even within practice.
Are you a fan of the helmet speakers?
I love the helmet speakers.
I mean, you played with that, right?
I played with it. Now, you're still going to have signals because of tempo. And you can imagine in the shoe, if the crowd's getting into it and it's second down, they go tempo on third down, you can communicate it in. Now, it depends on, is it just the mic, or are they going to let a mic linebacker, or are they going to let the whole defense have, a lot of that has to be ironed out. Because in the NFL, it's a green dot. It's one guy. So you would get the call, and then it'd be on you to signal it or yell it to everybody else in the defense. Which I know during the bowl games, some of the teams had it where the whole defense would have the mic. That would be a dream. But just because, it would prevent, obviously, a lot of the sign stealing and stuff that happens.
James, you were really diplomatic in your answer about Sonny. I appreciate that. But are you lobbying for him to move to your room? And then also, is that
I think every coach in our defensive staff would lobby for Sonny to come to their room. I think he just has that. He has that versatility and that skill set.
Is that kind of up to him and Mick at this point, and then he shows up in the spring and you reevaluate what his size is, or how does that process look for you? Because obviously,
I think it's a combination probably of everybody. I think it's probably Coach Knowles and Coach Day talking about. I think there's a balance of what's best for our defense and what's best for Sonny's future. He's a big human, and when you look at his body size, I think that he would excel, obviously, as a linebacker. I also think that he has a unique skill set to where he can play out in space like he did last year. So I think it's just trying to figure out, what does Sonny want to do? What do we think is best for the Buckeyes, and also with his future?
James, what do you want to see from CJ Hicks? He obviously was a 5-star guy, had veterans in front of him, but looking to get on the field. What do you need to see from him?
I think just consistency, to be honest with you. CJ has all the potential in the world. He does, and I think sometimes he's just got to cut it loose and go play. And I think honestly, I expect a big spring from CJ. I think with the way he has attacked this offseason workouts, the way he's carried himself, I expect him to take a jump. And look, for some guys, it's easy to come in right away and just go and play. And for some, it takes a little bit more development. But I think CJ's getting to a point where hopefully this spring there's a lot of growth. And maybe some of that will come with just the fact, hey, this position is for the taking, right? And I think some guys thrive on that. And we'll find out kind of how he reacts to it. But I'm a big fan of CJ Hicks. I always have been, because I think, like you said, he has such a raw and rare kind of skill set to where he can just physically, he has so many traits that you love, at the linebacker position.
What about Gabe Powers? Where do you see him fitting?
Yeah, Gabe looks good as well. And I think Gabe last year, I can't think of players. Cody Simon's definitely one, but Gabe Powers got significantly better from last spring all the way through the fall and into the winter. You know what I mean? So as the season went on, you would notice him kind of making plays in practice routinely to where you're like, okay, I think the light bulb is coming on for Gabe. And so I can't speak enough when you talk about those two and talk about Arvell Reese, how big this spring will be for them, because it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to see who's going to be in there alongside Cody Simon. And like I said earlier, whether that's just one guy and it's two players playing, which I hope it's not, because my hope is we're able to keep people fresh for this long haul of a season.
James, what's something you picked up from Coach Knowles? Remember I asked you a while ago what you kind of brought to the table? What is something you picked up last year that, that you could tell there was experience there? It was coming from it that you've added to your tool belt, so to speak.
Yeah, I think seeing how Jim calls a game and his thought process is fascinating, because he really is brilliant with how, when you go back and self-scout on when he made certain calls against certain formations, and you're like, my goodness, this guy is on, with what he's deciding to call. I think just being with him, Tim, for the whole year, you got to see how he approached the game. You got to see kind of his expectations. And then I think with someone like Jim, when you don't know, you got to ask a question, kind of like what he's looking for.
Yeah.
But I think you just, in year one, where you're getting to know somebody and you're working with them, and then now it's like, okay, I know what he expects. And so I think there's just experience that has been very fruitful. And I think I'll be better for it this year, having been through a full season with him.
James, does the jack position exist?
It does exist.
Is that something that's a part of your room? Is it something that CJ, Arvell, Gabe have an opportunity to work into? I mean, you're just not only two guys playing, right? But then there's this nebulous third opportunity.
Yeah.
Is that yours?
I don't think it's. You mentioned Arvell, CJ, Mitch Melton probably is another candidate. It's definitely a part of our scheme. We didn't use it last year, but 2 years ago they used it a lot. And as we go through and we self-scout, we're trying to figure out, hey, what are we bringing to the table for this season? So to be honest with you, we haven't gotten to those conversations yet about kind of that or who will coach it, but I think it's something that's definitely unique to Jim's scheme, and I think it'd be very beneficial for us. But you always weigh, I guess this is something to ask Jim, is you always weigh, hey, we have all this stuff in the system, and how much of all of that do we really need versus what do we actually do really well so our guys can play really fast. And there are some times where you need a lot, and there's sometimes where you don't need much. You can just go play. And I think that's for Coach Knowles to decide.
Tim asked about your voice as far as the expansion of your role.
Yeah.
Before you even were here officially, there was, before you were in the building, you had input on a guy or two around the country that would get offered, like Peyton Pierce, for example. How different is your voice now in recruiting than it was a year ago? Is this you're choosing the linebackers that you want to recruit, or is this still
Yeah, I think yes. So when you go in there and make the board, you're ranking them the way you see them. And Coach Day has always said that, you're the head coach of your position. You're the one in charge to each of us. And so with the title comes that responsibility. So I think the reaction, I'll tell you what, it's nice to be able to tell them now that I know, like, I am the linebacker coach. I don't just coach the linebackers, because there's a difference there. I've had that used against me over the last year, quite honestly, to where parents or recruits have said, essentially, like, how do I know you're going to be there? I won't name names, but other schools have said, hey, he's not even going to be there. He's going to have to leave to get a full-time role. And so you kind of have to navigate that. Not anymore, thankfully. But I mean, when you're here, you don't, like, I try to be an ambassador of Ohio State. I love this school. It's changed my life. It's done wonders for me and my family. To play here, recruit your position at the school you went to, at the place that you love, it's so natural. And so, you know, when you're explaining it to people, like, I'm sure there are some coaches who have to come off as car salesmen, like, there ain't none of that because I've lived it. And I think that's a huge benefit when you're talking to young people, trying to convince them to come to your school. It's like, this is what it did for me. And the fact that I'm not from Ohio, that's a whole other perspective when you're talking to kids not from Ohio. But now that I've been through here and the brotherhood has obviously accepted me and Buckeye Nation is so incredible, it's like, there's a reason why I'm here, because I love this place. And I want to raise my girls around this place because of how special it is and how it changed my life, and I know it can change all these other young men's lives.
Did you go to the other side of the ball, but what's your fondest Bill O'Brien memory in his tenure here?
I didn't really even get into it much with Bill O'Brien when he was here. I wanted to bring up the fact that I think when I was with the Saints, we practiced against him when he was the head coach of the Texans, and what I think is the hardest practice I've ever gone through in my life. I consider myself really, like, I was an effort guy. The whole, like, 4 to 6, A to B +2, like, that's me. I can live that all day as a player. But that practice in Houston, when I was with the Saints, when we were, I mean, that was, gosh, I think Cody Simon was there, Braxton was there, Mike Thomas was a rookie. We had some Buckeyes all over the field. But that was the first time in a practice of my career where I thought about, like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. The humidity in Houston that day, I wanted to bring that up because I think that was a beast. That right there was a beast.
Now, your first recruiting visit, or your first when you were there in front of Ryan, did you practice that overnight? I mean, you know, your spiel.
No, I didn't.
How did you prepare for it? Because you knew you were auditioning.
You know, Tim, I didn't. I think I was so comfortable in the respect that I knew the players that I was going to talk to. I had relationships with them. I knew the material that I had to present. And so I was just ready. I wasn't anxious. There was no nervousness about it because a lot of it was just talking ball with them, and that comes second nature to me. So being able to sit there and explain how I can help each of those young men develop and become the best version of themselves, not only as football players but as young men, I think that there wasn't some kind of, like, big study session that needed to happen because it's just talking ball.
You've always been a great guy to talk to. I mean, because I've known you since whenever. But those years you spent on the radio, did that help even more to converse? You understand what I'm saying? talk when even you don't have something to say, to come up with something to say.
Yeah. Well, my wife always says that I have no problem just talking. She says I'm the talker in the relationship. So yeah. I think just finding conversation. Look, in recruiting, if you enjoy people, it's really, I think it's easy. You're trying to get to know everyone. And you're trying to figure out who are the decision makers in a lot of these kids' families or friends, coaches. And you're getting to know them. And if you keep getting to know them in an authentic manner and build a relationship over time, I think it works out well for you. If you just go through the motions and all that, I think that's where people can get in trouble from my short time in doing it. So you just have to be intentional, pay attention, and take interest in these young people. And I think, the more, it's just like anybody. Like, at first you might talk to some people, they're quiet, and you keep talking to them to get comfortable, and they open up. It's the same way in recruiting.
James. 2 more minutes, folks. 2 more minutes.
A little bit ago, but you had a successful career. You probably don't need the money. Why do you want to do this? I mean, you had a radio job, pretty efficient probably. I mean, what is it? The passion about this that makes you want to put in the hours and do what you want to do?
Yeah, I think when I retired, I think for about 8 months, Bill, I thought about, it's a really hard moment when you watch film and you're like, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z. And then it dawns on you, my body can't do X, Y, Z anymore. That's hard to come to grips with when you love the game so much. And so since 4th grade, I've been told when practices, what lifts to do. Your life's kind of been mapped out around this game that you love and you're obsessed with since 4th grade. For 8 months, it took me a while to really, I don't know if bitterness is the right word, just almost like a frustration that you couldn't participate in the game you loved anymore after I decided to retire. And so I tried to figure out like what else really interests you. And it dawned on me after 8 months, like your love is football. Like your major was football. Like, yes, I have a degree in communications. I used it doing radio and TV, but my first love has always been football. And so I felt like the PhD was in that. And so it was like, okay, at first that's why I got into media. I wanted to be around the game. And then once I was in media, I felt myself getting fired up whenever I did the coaches interviews. And I just asked myself one off season, I'm like, I think I was getting to be 35 years old. I'm like, if you don't jump into this, you might look back and really regret it. And so once I jumped into it, I knew it was the right thing to do. I think a lot of it is because I love young people. So I want to see young people get to live their dream out like I was able to. I joke all the time, there's a 3-star from Minnesota, but really like my singular focus was just, I'm gonna keep playing football until they don't let me anymore. And when you come to a place like Ohio State, whether you're blessed to play 4 or 5 years here and that's it, or whether you're blessed to play 10 years in the league, like this town and this fan base, if you treat it right, will take care of you for life. And it becomes your family. And so I think as I dealt kind of in media and then I jumped into coaching, it was like, this is obvious. This is obvious. You love the game of football. You love young people. And I felt the coaches that I played for, Luke Fickell, Jim Tressel, Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs, they were all great developers of men as well. And probably the 3 most impactful men in my life outside of my father. So the thought that I could hopefully be that to somebody else, I think is what gets me up every morning. And I tell a lot of these recruits, like, yes, I want to be there with you in the green room when Goodell calls your name, right? Like that's, a lot of these kids want to get developed. But I also hope that these men call me when they decide to get engaged someday or get married and they're like, hey, coach, I want you there. Because that's the kind of relationship that I had with Luke Fickell. That's the kind of relationship I had with Spags, is that it was more than just ball. And so I think that's why I wake up and I attack it every day.
When you got into
working
this,
with young people, and you talk about working with young people. So does that mean you're a college coach, or is a coach and the NFL could be in your future?
I mean, I'm just glad. I don't think I've taken I'm still riding the high of being a linebacker coach at Ohio State. So, I think for me, it's how do I develop. My focus right now, to be honest, is how am I going to develop multiple guys through this spring to where we're comfortable as a defensive staff playing 4 or 5 guys at linebacker. I don't think about all that. Wherever my feet are, I just want to be present to helping those around me, and impacting not only guys in my room, to be honest, but also, whether it's talking trash to the DBs, because that's all they do, is talk trash every day, it's kind of working around those relationships with everybody on the team, and just trying to be a positive influence in the locker room.
When you got into this 2 years ago, did you think this would happen this quickly, that you'd be the linebackers coach at Ohio State?
I was hopeful. I didn't know. You never really know, because what I've learned, from getting into it is that there's a lot of moving puzzle pieces, right, that need to happen, right? But as things kind of started to go, towards the end of the year and moves started to get made, I was hopeful. But if you would have said 2 years ago that, hey, within 2 years you'd be the linebacker coach at Ohio State, I'd probably say it was a long shot, not from a credibility standpoint, I think more so from the dominoes that would have needed to fall to kind of make it happen. So I'm just grateful that those dominoes fell and that I'm here and I've been given the opportunity.
And you mentioned Brian before. Just does he inspire you as someone who kind of took a similar path to where he is now?
Yeah. And in all honesty, it was a call from Heartline when I was at Notre Dame that was inquiring about, coming back, and I've always kind of talked to Brian about it as he developed in his coaching career, and you see kind of where he's at. And I think, when you have a receiver room like he has, where he's consistently convincing the top wide receiver recruits in the country to come to a room that is already full of the top wide receiver recruits in the country, like that takes a certain mindset that he's developed. But it's not just because he's recruiting the best kids, he's recruiting the right kind of kids as well that are willing to compete and push the room forward. So I think, that's a good example, I think, for all of our position rooms to kind of try to emulate.
Hey, James.
Yep.
Minnesota State High School Hockey Championships getting ready to start. That means we've got a video about 3 weeks away of the all-hair team. Yeah. Can you talk about your flow as a high school?
I had a nice flow. I had a flow back in the day. You had to get in the shower in the morning, put a ball cap on. I have straight hair, so I had to try to wing it out of the cap, and then the wings would die by period 2 in school. But I retweeted. Did you see what I retweeted the other day? No. The Trojans beat the Hornets at Braemar Arena, which I had one of my sickest goals at a sweet backhand. I was on the power play. I came from below the face-off circle. The goalie tried the poke check, missed, boom, went backhand, top shelf. I remember skating over to Edina's student section, jumping up on the glass, shaking it. I mean, those are good memories right there now. When you win at Braemar Arena, those are good memories.
James, thank you very much.